when you open your own business, you don't have friends.
Yeah.
You have customers. And a lot of people were saying I was crazy. I wasn't doing happy hour. The bank was not very nice to me. They wouldn't give me a plastic card. They gave me checks. If you want to become a professional, then act like a professional. I don't think anyone in our business is looking down the nose at anyone who gets drunk or anything. But if you do it at work, or if you come to work with a hangover, you're fired. And there's a lot of discrimination going on. You just have to brush it off your shoulder and work hard and go for it.
Kirsten, thank you so much for being my guest to the Barbox podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Kirsten Holm. I own KBAR, and it's a cocktail bar in downtown Copenhagen, and I've owned it for 23 years, but I've been in the business for about 42 years. I did it ever since I was totally young. I started in the hotel business.
Wow, 23 years, that's a career path as an owner, and as well the prior years as a bartender or starting in this career. Yeah. How did you actually start? How did you ended up in this industry?
Well, I think I started like a lot of other people do. I was a student at university reading television and film science, and it was called that at that time. And in the weekends, I worked in a nightclub in a big hotel, and it was quite good money at that time, and it was fun because it was so different from anything else I've done in my life. Nobody in my family has ever done anything like that, and I think what really attracted me to the business was how 2 hours were never the same, the days were never the same. And looking back, I also think what I really liked about it was that you come in and you do A, and you actually finish. And you go out, you turn off the light, and everything's been done. It's from going to A to Z. I think a lot of jobs, consultancies and this and that, many times you don't see the end.
Yep.
That's at least what a lot of people tell me. A lot of nurses and doctors and so on, they don't see the end. The end result. And I think that's also what's really satisfying in our business. You do a catering, a cocktail catering, and you see it from the beginning to the end. I think for me that mentally is very satisfying. I like all the crazy, unexpected moments. You can never foresee what's going to happen. When it's going to happen, who's going to do it. I think still this day today, it's full of surprises to be behind a bar.
Through our discussions in here with the previous guest as well, one thing that we noticed is most of the people in the industry, they are somehow adrenaline junkies. Is that the case with you as well?
I know what they mean. Yes, and it's actually for me there's different kinds of adrenaline. There's the Friday and Saturday, for the 3 and 4 hours where it's totally crazy. I think that is a real adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
I also enjoy the adrenaline rush that I find is very different when you are in total control, like on a Wednesday, for example, when you're alone in the bar serving, you're receiving people at the door and you're waving them goodbye. I think that to get everything right, not to make the guest, it's a different kind of rush where it's more, I would call it a factory working situation, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. So on the weekdays, it's more like control adrenaline. Let's call it like that, where you are in control, and then the guests are in there to have a good time.
Yes.
Perfect. Tell us a bit how you opened KBAR, because KBAR right now it's the bar with the longest activity in Copenhagen, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I worked at the Royal Hotel, which is one of the world's oldest designer hotels, and I think in the 90s it started to become very abroad, not so much in Denmark or in Scandinavia, but abroad it became very posh to go to hotel bars. and be seen in hotel bars, to meet in hotel bars in New York, London, everywhere, but not in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And because we were the oldest boutique hotel, and it was Arne Jacobsen who designed the hotel, there's actually quite an amazing history behind it, because Arne Jacobsen, he did, he's famous for the chairs. Everyone's always saying, the chairs. But he did, he did the building, he did the cutlery, he did the toilet paper holder, he did, he did everything. So in that way, he was more than just amazing. So we had tons and tons of architect students, architect nerds, foreign designer nerds. We had rock stars coming into the hotel, looking at the hotel, because it was so worldwide famous. I think it was more famous abroad than it was in Denmark at that time. And what really struck me was we had, at that time, we had Wallpaper, the magazine Wallpaper. We had a whole, a big crew staying, doing design in Denmark. And they got, money from wonderful Copenhagen. So they actually stayed much longer, and they did an extra issue in Wallpaper, but also because they found more than they had expected to write about. Well, at least that's what they say, or the money was good. I don't know. And I talked to them, because many of them were actually there for, about 3 months. And they were just so shocked. There was no cocktail bar in town. They couldn't, it was only in the hotels. And actually the Royal Hotel was the only hotel in the whole of Copenhagen where we muddled, because I was playing with ginger, chili, lemongrass, trying to muddle and do it. We didn't have anything on the card, but I tried to make martinis with, because, it was the 90s, with all these effects. And they said it was the only place they had experienced in Denmark where there was, a contemporary touch. And that sort of just sat in me. And I was also getting older at that time. I was thinking, oh my God, is there, also all my bosses, the general manager, they all got suddenly younger than me. And I was thinking, gosh, is somebody, well, it was a mix of elements, but I was also thinking, gosh, is the general manager is going to change me out with an 18-year-old blonde at some stage, or so, and I knew that the bar was the most, and I knew that from everyone, that the bar was the most profitable business in the whole hotel. So the times were really for us. So when I visited my sister in London, I brought back fresh ginger. It wasn't that easy to get in Copenhagen, fresh coriander and some spices and this and that. So, I always brought it back and muddled and shook and infused and this and that. And the hotel gave us totally free hands, because it suited the hotel that we did that kind of cocktails. So I was, traveling the world. I also came to Scotland a few times, because my brother-in-law is originally from Scotland. And it just struck me that small fishing towns in Scotland had a cocktail bar. And it was just everywhere in Scotland, everywhere in Britain, they had cocktail bars in town. And even some of the smarter gastropubs could make a few cocktails, and they were actually very decent cocktails compared to what you could get in Copenhagen. And the whole thing, it just started growing in my mind that this was really crazy. And just to make a very long story short, I also think with 9/11, the change in first class hotel guests changed. We were suddenly making less money. And I just thought, I'm just too old for this to happen to me. I don't deserve what I've done for this hotel to go down in salary because we're getting crummy guests.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I said to my father, I'd really like to look at location. He was a little bit spoofed by it, but we went around, and he was, of course, very annoying, because he was immediately looking at budgets. He was really annoying. No, Kirsten, this is too expensive, because then on monthly you have to sell for, and so. But he was probably, my he was very good at that. And suddenly one day, the location where KBARs came up, and a friend of mine who was in the wine business, he said, "Listen, I've been asked if I would open a wine bar, but I don't. Why don't you go and look at it?" So I did, and that's how it all started. It was actually an old seamstress room for a very rich woman, and she passed away, and that's how the rooms were offered. Yeah. So.
And then you started the cocktail bar itself. I have one question before that one. How much your family did influence or supported you? Because you mentioned your father helped you with all of the numbers.
Well, I tell you, just from when I was very, very young, where they could see that I was doing less and less university and more bar work, they were not happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think all parents are like that. You ask any bartender, the parents are not wild about it. And also because I wasn't getting papers on my education. I wasn't finishing it properly. Mm-hmm. I even don't think my parents weren't wild about either. But when I started looking at my own location, my father was really worried. So he was my toughest critic when it came to budget. Mm-hmm. And also the bank was not very nice to me. And it was only because I'm a woman. They wouldn't give me a plastic card. They gave me checks I could use to pay. And, you know, I knew males that were opening restaurants. They were getting a plastic card, a credit card. You know, it was just, everything was very different. And people were really hard to negotiate with on alcohol contracts and all. But that's a whole different discussion. And I've been brought up to brush all that off me. You know, it's not, I don't want to look back at it as something negative or anything. You know, it doesn't matter. But it was just interesting. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people thought I was a little bit cuckoo, because when people walked in, I had the shakers, you know, just actually a lot like it is now, the shakers lined up and everything. And there were places making cocktails in Copenhagen. There were. But not with shakers. I think, you know, we were 3 hotel bars that were, you know, that could make a decent Manhattan and old fashioned and stir, mm-hmm. and a dry martini stirred, but nobody was shaking. Everyone was blending. You know, everything was frozen or slush or whatever. So, so I wanted to stir. I wanted to shake. I wanted to strain. And a lot of people thought that was really strange, and you know, but I thought it was good to stick to my guns.
Mm-hmm. It's impressive, your story as well. It's impressive of how you manage as well to keep going, even you faced so many difficulties being a woman into this industry. Do you believe that it could have been different if you had a partner as well as a woman, or how would you say?
No, I think it's been easiest to be alone, even though it's also been very lonely. And I think because you don't know if, in the beginning there was a lot of choices I had to do. Am I willing to do this compromise or this you know, there's a lot of people who think they know better, and you know that some of them are very successful, so you're sort of asking yourself, should I listen to them or to me? And I think if I had had a partner, I would have to compromise somewhere, and what would those have been? For example, it took 2 to 3 months before it sort of took off, and a lot of people were saying I was crazy. I wasn't doing happy hour, and I've never done happy hour, and I just felt so strongly for not doing happy hour, not giving discounts, nothing, you know. And also because I had a few smart people, you know, there's these sentences I just remember from here and there from people giving me. One was, when you open your own business, you don't have friends.
Yeah.
You have customers. And it is so true. So I stuck to my guns. And even though I had days where I didn't sell anything, all in all, my sales just rose and rose and rose. And I also think the timing was right. If I had opened 5 years before, I might not have survived. Or if, and it would probably have been easier if I had waited 5 years. But it took off, and it took off. It was okay. I could just pay my bills, and but I've always been a little bit sensible. I've always tried to be, sensible with money and what I do and what I don't do. So I think that helped too.
So you've been always that conscious person that wanted to stick to one bar, because most of the people nowadays, when they open a bar, right the moment they open, they said, okay, we're gonna have 2-3 more. Why not opening a second KBAR or a series of KBARs?
Well, I will admit at several stages I have been looking at locations, but I've been a little bit horrified by the rents, and even for many years ago. And also the key factor is you need the right person in place. And in our business, as you know, there's been 2,000 times where I thought I had the right person, and it wasn't. And I think that always scared me a little bit, losing control. And I just, at a certain stage, I just thought, it's so much easier. Stick to your guns, just stick to KBAR. I also was afraid that I would turn into a CEO. and I don't think that's where my force is. I think my force is teaching people hospitality, how to work behind a bar, what to think about, what not to think about. I think that's where and I think it's very important that we pay other people to do what we're not so good at, and then we make money on what we're really good at.
Yeah, we mentioned multiple times across these conversations hospitality. What does hospitality means to you personally?
Well, I think hospitality specifically in our business is, and I've said this over and over again, a good, tasty, delicious cocktail, it's only 30, maybe less % of a guest's experience. And you look at crummy places that are full every single day, it's not because of the cocktail necessarily, it's because of the party going on or the whatever's going on for different reasons. And I think really, really good hospitality is giving people the whole package. Eye contact when they come in. Are you playing the proper music that's appropriate for those kind of guests? What are you wearing? What's your body language? The lighting, is it cozy? Do you have the right choice of staff for your venue? All these things, the whole package.
Talking about the right staff, how do you find staff? I have to admit, through the years, you've seen many people, you've seen all of the changes into the behaviors. How do you manage to find the right staff, or what is the right staff?
Well, what is the right staff? I don't know. I think probably one of my, I think one of my most weak sides is being good at being a boss of staff. I think I've learned a lot, so I'm much better today. But the first 8-10 years, I think I made a lot of stupid mistakes. And that's because nobody has taught me otherwise. And I think, when I started hearing different ways of the different, well, it's just, bad environment doesn't help your business. I think that's a very basic thing. And I think that, a lot of people are also afraid of teaching other people things because they're going to steal your ideas and all. It's rubbish, all of it. And I think anyone who's good at their job, it's a gift that we're really good at something, and to pass it on to the younger. And I think it's so important to think that it's a compliment if people are pinching your ideas or copying you a little bit. It's a compliment.
Yeah, there's not so many people thinking the same way. And as a younger generation, I'm part of the younger generation. We, or I often tend to look at persons like you and take as an inspiration and have them as role models or leaders into the industry. Why do you think there's not so many people still activating in this industry, or especially women into this industry?
Well, I think that it's a rainbow of reasons. I think first of all, why do people get into the business? And I also so I think looking into those answers, I think already there you have your answers to your question. Why do people get into this business? An attitude, and also what you do in your workplace. You are the boss of being rewarded or not. I'm thinking from, either your superiors or from your guests or from your colleagues. For me, that's an adrenaline to get rewarded. And I just think, with women, I think we're still doing a lot of things wrong. We're bringing up our girls in the wrong way. And my father would have been 100 today, but he was a patriarch. He was the boss in our family, but he's always brought me up to brush things off and saying there's a lot of idiots out there, and there's a lot of discrimination going on. You just have to brush it off your shoulder and work hard and go for it. So, and a lot of other things he also said, but I think he's been an instigator to my insistence to exist and to also, have my right. And when I go around looking at the businesses and looking at bartenders and so on, and I think a lot of the girls are in the business for the wrong reason. If they're in it for, 5 or 6 years while they're studying and having fun, go for it. I did too. I've had one hell of a ride for many, many years. So yeah, of course, and our business is exceptional in that direction. We can have so much fun. But if you want to make a career out of it, a job, a proper job, it also has to start with you to respect the job. And if you want to become a professional, then act like a professional. I don't think anyone in our business is looking down the nose at anyone who gets drunk or anything. But if you do it at work, I would get really angry. Or if you come to work with a hangover or on drugs or whatever, you're fired, because it's not only am I paying you, but the guests are paying you too. They're paying for cocktails, and they're not paying to look at you look like an idiot and being unprofessional. So I think to have the right attitude to our job, we have to start with ourselves, and we have to demand respect. Because, I've even up in age, when I've been dating a guy, he's saying, when you're going to get a proper job? Yeah. Who does he think he is? I think it's so bizarre, but I just think we are at fault. We have not claimed respect, and a lot of people are not behaving professionally at work.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed as well, it's hard and easy at the same time. If you go with the mindset of, okay, I want to make a career out of this one, yes, alcohol, it's widely available for us. But if you treat it with respect, as you said, and if you treat it as a job, you say, okay, it's still a business. My mind needs to be clean all the time. So your point proved as well the same situation in here. And I would say right now, talking on behalf of my generation, maybe they will hate me, maybe not, we did not treat this one as a full profession. And we need to do something about it, because right now, Denmark, it's a exceptional place for chefs. Everybody, when you say Denmark, they think about chefs. We are a bit behind with the cocktails, and we need to do something out of it just to raise it a bit more. And people consider the bartenders a real job, consider it as a profession, as a chef or as an artist or as a musician is. What would you say one solution will be for that?
Well, I think there's basically a huge difference between bartenders and chefs. Not in smartness, intelligence, or charm or anything, but I think one of the keys to the success in Denmark in the gastro world is that all chefs have the same education. Hotel- og Restaurantskolen. And they're all educated from there. So it is up to that pupil where they want to bring it.
Mhm.
Do they want to work in a canteen or do they want to work at Noma? And I think that is what is so unique with the Danish model, is that it's the same house, the same building, they're all educated. They all have the same basic education. But it's up to you individually to bring it to the skies if you want.
Mhm. So they start with the foundation basically, and then you
Education.
take it in the
And we don't.
We
So
don't.
that's why I think it's even more important that we, as older in the business, that we do try to teach our staff as much as possible. And that's also, I'm always trying to appeal to them to be professional if they want to stay in the business. Because there is, I mean, some of my staff are students, so they have, the 10, 11 hours a week for their SU and all that. And then I have full-time bartenders.
Mhm.
But I really demand that they're professional. What are you wearing? How do you address your customers? I expect them to read the newspaper every day so that they can converse. Also, because we have a lot of foreigners.
Mhm.
You know, I expect them to be able to. If people choose to sit in the bar, it's very often because they want to talk to you or somebody. If they sit at a table, then they can choose to do whatever they want.
Mhm.
But there's nothing worse than, and I've tried it. You come to a bar. I've also had staff, who'd never traveled, who didn't read, who knew nothing. How uninteresting is that? It's boring. So I think that's important. If you want to become a good bartender, read. You don't have to be super intelligent, but read. Know what the EU, what is that? Which country, historically did this or that. Just to have the conversation going.
Mhm.
And also, secondly, culturally, that you know about different cultures, that you have a nose for it, and just a little bit of basic knowledge. Because I have a Greek, I have Spanish, I have different, I have people from all over the world working for me, and culture will often influence the way, the choices they make, the way they address you, the way everything. And I think if you have a basic knowledge of that, it will help you
Mhm.
how you choose to talk to people.
When you choose your staff, do you tend to go more for the women's, or do you tend to go more for the males?
No, it always warms my heart if I meet, what I would regard as professional female bartenders. It makes me happy. But no, I think in a small workplace like KBAR, it is super important with the chemistry.
Mhm.
And also, so I not try, but I try to focus on the papers, the CV, and the person, and
Mhm.
not which sex they are or anything. I try not to. That's actually also the way I've been brought up. But of course, I get really happy if there's a female bart, and I've just had 2 female bartenders. So, but it's not a focus.
Mhm.
And I think trial shifts, of the 2-hour trial shifts that I usually ask people to do, it will come out if the chemistry is there and if their attitude is right.
Mhm. So it's more focused on the attitude than the
Yeah.
skills, because
Yes.
skills, I assume,
Yeah.
it's much easier to train than the attitude to
No,
change.
I actually no. I really would like the cleverest bartender to seek a job with me, because I think it's wonderful that somebody can bring something new to the table.
Mhm.
KBAR wasn't the way it looks today, the way we work. It's not made by me 100%. I've had different clever bartenders come in and say, "Listen, Kirsten, I think it's easier if we do this and that." or this and this way. I listen.
Mhm.
And that's how KBAR, has reached this far. It's a result of a lot of professional opinions that have been behind bar.
That's fantastic to see people willing to listen. And I wanted to ask you more when we are going to this listening part. What's your management style?
Um, you should ask someone else that. I think I'm probably in many ways typical Danish.
What does that mean?
That means that I expect people individually to take responsibility and also to take initiative.
Mhm.
And take initiative and to regard your colleagues and the workplace as a group work. You solve the problems together. You don't, stampede your way and decide or something. You ask, you do it as a group. You solve the whole, the whole hospitality at KBAR. You solve it as a group.
That's great. Through the years, you've seen the industry basically growing. How was it when you started compared to now in terms of staffing? What changed in the mindset?
Well, it's been up and down through the years. We all around Corona, it was a nightmare to get staff and all that. And it was for about 1.5 years after that. And now it's much easier now. And also because I've never had so many good applications, because a lot of places are promising staff full time and not giving it to them, which I think the bar owners should be ashamed of themselves, because it's people's livelihood. I just over and over again, I have people continuously writing and calling, "Are you sure it's full time?" And I don't write it's full time if I don't mean it. And I also seek waiters, for only 11 hours. I write it.
Yep.
It's not 30 hours. It's not 20. It's 11 hours, and it's a weekend, and that's that. So I think shame on bar owners who don't stick to what they promise, because it is grown-up people's livelihood. It's not silly teenagers, and I really think it's awful. So it is easier today.
So it's easier today than before to get staff.
Yes, and good staff, because of, I think it's more that now than I've seen before, that a lot of places are not living up to what they're promising. So therefore, and there are some people who say, okay, we know that when Kirsten says full time, it's full time. So and I'm actually right now looking for a full time bartender, and so I have to put myself together soon and arrange trial shifts and so on. So it's interesting, but also I think a lot of good skilled bartenders, they're working in the hotels, and the hotels have really picked up on salaries, and I can't compete against them. I don't think any high-end bar in Copenhagen can pick those, do those salaries. And good for them, it's because they were screaming and shouting before, and I certainly wouldn't brag about my salary at that time, when I was younger in the hotel business. It was the tips that made it worthwhile. But yeah, I think times have changed that way. And also there's so many foreign students here. All my waiters and waitresses, working in the weekends and Thursdays and all that, they're all on SU, and then doing the minimum 10 to 11 hours a week thing. So, and that's much easier too. But I think it's always tricky to get someone that lives up to the way they seem to be. So I'm always afraid, they're going to change, when they start Monday morning, or, are they going to live up to what I see now? And you don't, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be pushy in my comments or questions and so on. And I always presume that people are telling me the truth on their CVs, where they've been for how long and so on. It's very rare I check up on anybody.
So you check up basically on them in person.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I won't mention names, but I have a girl who's been very insistent. And I said to her last time, listen, you're going to have to do more about, your cocktail side. You don't know anything. But she felt she did know.
Mhm.
And I said, have you been a customer at KBAR? Have you bought cocktails at KBAR? And she said, no, I've only been in to look. And I said, but you've got to come in, sit down, order a cocktail. And if you can do what you see they're doing behind the bar, then apply again. She's applied again, but she still does know much more. And she hopes that I will teach her. And I just think, K-pop, we're too far to, we don't, if I had a runner position, that could be interesting. And then to shift that person slowly into the bar. I've had waitresses and waiters who were like I was when I was young, caught up by what was going on behind the bar. So Renata, my bar chef, she came from the Royal Academy of Architecture, and she was finished with her bachelor degree, and she was waitressing for me. And then when my bar chef stopped, she asked me if she could have the job, and I looked, yeah, sure, because I always think it's worth the investment that your floor staff also know how to mix cocktails.
Yep.
Gin and tonics, explain to them, because, and that's another thing a lot of people underestimate. Most of the sale is on the floor and not in the bar. So the floor is actually much more important, but we all seem to be so focused on the bar. Even I have to catch myself looking in the bar, okay, who's sitting where, is everyone happy in the bar? And then I look at the floor. It's just a bad habit. It's a funny image that bar just has. It attracts my attention. So I always try to. It's really important to train your bar staff, your floor staff properly, so they can sell it. I always go crazy when waiters they start pulling a guest up to look at the 30 different gins we have. Oh, don't do that. We're busy. So I always try to say to them, listen, before they start asking, before you give them a chance to ask which gins do we have, look at them immediately and ask, would you like a smooth gin or a sharp gin? And whiskey, do you want a rye, a bourbon, for a Manhattan? Don't go into brands and names. Let the bartenders choose and write it, down when you order it, that smooth gin, and then the bartender will.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like a synergy between the bartender and the floor staff if they communicate in a proper way.
That's alpha and omega. It's so important. I go crazy if any bartenders don't speak nicely to the floor. First of all, they're really important in your business. Secondly, you don't have people not speaking nicely to each other in a workplace. That I have learned.
Yeah.
Because I could I could lose my temper too, and I probably still can. But I really, for many years now, I've really tried to control it.
Mm-hmm. And when you have people going from one position to another, what kind of skills or what kind of mindset do you look for them to have?
Well, I think in a job seeking situation, I really want them to know how to do really good cocktails. I want them to be able to pick the right, do the right choices. It's like a chef, how do you make a red wine sauce or something? There's some basic, or how do you boil potatoes? You have to know that because it takes too much time. And I actually think a lot of people underestimate how much training it takes to be a good bartender. And I don't think I have that. We don't have that time because Friday's up soon. We're going to get busy. You have to know your job. But what you can do, and which is very important to me, is because you can have a really good bartender, but you also need them to go in what I call my direction. And that is the DNA of your business. I feel, and I've always worked for it, that's always been the focus of all my choices. Everything has to fit to KBAR's DNA. It has a DNA. You always you have to, it's a restaurant, or if it's a bar, a hotel, or a shop, a shoe shop, or the most successful ones will always have a DNA. You know, you walk in blindfolded, you mustn't be in doubt about where you are. And so therefore I feel that we have a bit of a you know, a certain profile in our in which taste we go for at KBAR, and I expect my new bartenders to pick up on that. So you know, basically I want them to be good bartenders, but also to go in the direction and to respect the DNA of KBAR.
If we go back just one step behind, what would be one thing that a bartender, let's take the example, it's working in a hotel and they want to swap to the cocktail bars. Why should they do this change?
Okay, I've worked in the hotel business for, you know, I can't remember, almost 20 years or more. I really loved my time in the hotel business. It taught me so much about, and you know, the hotel business is so fascinating because it has different departments. It has different aspects you have to consider. So I always understand what people find to be attractive and going, you know, doing a career as in the hotel business. But on the other hand, their budget focusing, the bureaucracy that has really taken over in the hotels. You know, it's very often you will have food and beverage managers who are paid salary according to what they can save of money. And then I don't have to say much more about how, you know, how it will affect a bar.
Yeah. So that's a great answer. That's a great answer for the people who are gonna listen. They will know exactly what that means as well. Good. So you opened the bar. How was after, let's say, 5 years or after 10 years compared to now? Because to the newer generation, it's a bit mind-blowing to have somebody like you over here and being in the business for 23 years. How much the industry did evolve from day one to now?
How much of
the industry, the culture, the cocktail culture evolved in Copenhagen?
Well, I think half a year after I opened, the first cocktail bar opened. And then, you know, it started drizzling. I don't think any of them are open still with the same owners. I can't think of it, at least. No, they've, you know, changed location and this and that. But I think after 10 years I opened, I think the cocktail bars became really, you know, high end, and there was suddenly several, and also the customers changed, I think. I think, you know, the customers became more and more conscious about, you know, what they want, branding, you know, could I have a Stolly Schneier, Cosmopolitan, you know, a little bit Americanized. And it's not that bad today, but it, you know, it suddenly became modern to brand the cocktail you ordered, which was really annoying. But I think people are very conscious about, oh, can I please have a very dry, or can I have a very citrusy margarita, or can I have a... So people are very much more conscious now, and it's I like that.
And as a community, as the people who shaped this industry, how did it change? How do you see it nowadays with the newer generation compared to your generation? Do you see them more together?
The cocktails, I think basically the business hasn't changed at all. But of course, if you want to open something new, you want to do something. And I think the tendency now is just to make it more and more complicated. technically complicated. You know, you fat wash, you strain, you still you this or that, you know, and you use citric acid instead of lime and lemon, and everything has to be see-through, big ice cube, thin, expensive glasses, and you know, it's just nothing new. It's just in a different packaging.
And as the people, are they more together now, or are still separated, or?
Well, it struck me. I was just invited by Jules to go to Cognac, and we were 16 smaller bar owners. And most of us had been in the business, you know, we had known each other for 10, 15 years. And that was actually quite fun because I've never met them this way. And it was really interesting. And it was such a good vibe. So, you know, everyone's settled and doing the best they can. And we all agree, you know, since COVID, the patterns have changed, a lot of things. But to point out exactly what has changed, no, I can't do that. But I still think there's a good atmosphere, but I do feel that people are trying to find their own individual way, which is smart, because if the bars start looking too much like each other, it's going to not be very interesting to go out.
So it's still more like collaboration between you, but trying to compete with each other, right? Or between bars.
I don't know. I
that.
think compared to a lot of other countries, I probably think the chemistry is a little bit more smooth here among us.
Yeah.
I always feel that if I call someone and ask advice on where did you get your ice cube, or where did you buy that glass I saw on Instagram, or I always get an answer. People are always polite and nice in our, you know, different bar owners. So in that way, it's always been, you know, really nice to be in the business. There's a lot of the young people, I don't know them. You know, I try to, if I have bartenders that compete, I always try to go to the competitions, you know, not only to support my bartender, but, you know, to sniff around and look what's going on. But it's a lot of new faces all the time. So it's a little bit confusing. And it's probably also because there's just so many bars opened and hotel bars opened. And a lot of hotels really are trying to heighten the level.
You mentioned competitions. How important are them in a bartender career or a professional career?
I don't know how important they are, but I've competed a lot. And when I competed, there's a huge difference. I'm so happy I'm not competing now. I think when I competed for many, many years, I saw a lot of what I didn't want to do. I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to make that person's cocktail terrible and this and that and that. I think today there's a lot of really good cocktails being made. I think the knowledge is so different today, and the style is different. And also because of social media and well, everything, you know, you must remember we didn't have mobile phones in the 90s. We didn't have the internet in the same way and all that. And today, the knowledge comes quicker. You know, you get smarter quicker, faster than we did for many years ago. So the competitions now, there's you know, exciting infusions or tea thingalingies, or you know, there's more exciting things going on now than there was when I was younger.
That's a great way to say it. And I'm just rambling things, going back and forth. I just like to ask you, because our listeners, we're gonna get a lot of things from your experience. Coming back to the school situation, how do you see it as a solution? What it needs to be done, at least in Copenhagen or in Denmark, as a group to make a difference
for the industry?
For the industry itself.
Well, I think there's many aspects. I think work environment is very important. I think among us in the hospitality business, I think a lot of people underestimate how important chemistry and work attitude and ethics are in our industry.
And I have one question as well. What keeps you motivated? Because we've been talking for the past 45 minutes, but I did not ask you what keeps you still motivated of going on and on every day. It's a tough job.
I think, and that also that answer, it's a tough job, has a lot to do with, what we actually started the little talk together is about, why are there not more elderly bartenders or female bartenders? That is exactly, has something to do with it too. I think it's just so important that in our business that you choose it. You manifest it, you choose it. I think it's almost impossible to be in our business half-heartedly. Because then you could just work in a pub or in a bodega or whatever. If you want to work in a high-end cocktail bar, you just have to include different aspects in our business. And I think a lot of people aren't doing that. They think they choose it. But you also have to be honest with yourself. Do you want a wife and a dog and 3 children? You have to ask yourself all these questions. Do you want all these evening shifts? So I think probably also I'm very different from a lot of people. I never ever wanted a office job. I never wanted any 9-to-5 job. I could never see myself like that. And today, of course, I can't get enough. No evenings for me, thank you, if I can work with that. But I also think I'm just old now, but I really, thinking back, I really loved going to work. I think, the adrenaline and you never knew what was going to happen that day. Or you're going to be flooded by someone for a big party from the banquet, rushing down to your bar, or is someone suddenly get a heart attack in the bar? It was just so many crazy things always happening, and I love it. But I also think there's a lot of self-discipline too in making the bar attractive to come to work to. Work for. I think there's so many different aspects, and it's important for you to find out your DNA and what can you do to make yourself more happy at work.
So it basically becomes the second home, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But
you also, most of us use a lot of hours. If in Denmark, a 37 hour a week is a full-time job. Some people say, oh, it's so many hours. Other people, we will laugh at that. 37 hours, it's nothing. But it's still many hours away from home, or not in your free time. And I just think it's really important for all of us, for quality of life, to be happy those 37 hours and think it's interesting.
And how did you manage to balance the life and the bar life?
Yeah.
How that one
that
went?
It's so difficult. I also think there's a huge difference between me being a bar owner. I feel it's my responsibility for everything to function, to work. But as an employee, I think I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I think what has made it for me to survive is planning. I have a very strict planning. I have a work schedule. Let me just, I don't want to sound too holy or anything, because I have within the last 1.5 years gone down in hours big time, because I just felt I was getting too old. I had problems with my shaker arm, and I just felt, okay, I'm getting old. I gotta do something. So I went down in hours. I come to the bar every day in a couple of hours and help them unpack bottles, or, I'll water the plants because they forget that, or just check the toilets. Is everything soap full? I'll and then I'll see things. But I have always had a strict routine. My schedule, my private schedule. I have my work schedule. I'm planned.
That's unusual for somebody who's working in this industry.
Well, I have to, because I also, with private friends, if I let's go out and eat and try this new Italian restaurant around the corner. I can't just do it. And there's some bar owners that call me and say, hey, let's go out. Have you seen, there's that tasting. We can also have some dinner there tonight. And I say, but I can't. I'm going to a dinner, or I'm going to work, or I can very rarely. Today I can, but before 1.5 years ago, when you looked at my calendar, it was crazy. And if somebody canceled a dinner, I didn't have a free night before two weeks from then. But most of my friends learned that, that when we had an agreement to go out, I meant business, don't cancel me. But it really just takes a lot of organization and planning to get it right. That you see your private friends, you have your night with your evening with your boyfriend. And also I loved having, and it was so rare, I had one evening or night where I didn't have to do anything. I could, see a Netflix thing, or I could... or look ugly all evening, didn't have to think about anything. I could have bad breath or whatever, That's important for me too, to have one night where it's just me.
So time for yourself.
Yeah, and that was rare. And I think the luxury now is I feel now I have time to just look out in the air. I know it sounds really crazy, but because I feel my whole life, everything has been planned. I've had to have a work schedule, private schedule, everything, boom, 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 boom. And now I can take a book out in the afternoon. Like yesterday, for example, in the good weather, I took a book. I sat in the shade under a tree and read a book. I could not have done that in any of all the years before that. There's always, okay, it's Sunday, even though I'm not open Sunday, I have to check those and those bills. I have to wash the dirty linen from the bar. I have to write those mail and complain about this or do that. Yesterday, nothing. Of course, I answer a few mails, so so I don't have a lot to look at Monday morning. But it's such a luxury to have time to dwell, and I haven't had that for so many years.
What did it change in planning then? How did you change it?
I enforced it on myself. And of course, it also means the bar is making less money, less profit, because suddenly I'm not working 50 hours a week behind the bar. It took me some time to convince, and I think I still am suffering from a bad conscience because I'm not working so much. and it's really taken time to get used to. And even today I grab myself from saying something stupid, as though I'm making excuses for myself for going down in hours. And but it's made me happier. And it's again finding that spark in connection with your work. It's so, you either have, some people don't have that luxury. If the business is going down in sales and this and that, then I have to save money. I have to work even more on this, and that I don't know what to say to those people. And our sales have also gone down because so many places have opened and people have changed pattern and all that. But I'm still making money. I'm still doing a plus. And I've just agreed with myself to make less money for myself, and it's been worth it. It really has been worth it. but I think we all have to make our own choices, but it's so important. It's not just for bar people. I think it's for everybody to have a job that you really like to go to.
Yeah, I can see you have a lot of passion through it, and everybody can see through your career that the passion is there.
Yeah.
So that's as well for me one of the most driving things. Because if you don't have the passion, if you don't like what you are doing, then it's useless.
Yeah.
You will not gonna do it.
Yeah.
You will do it for a while and then probably change career.
Yeah.
But that's an amazing story. And I have one more question before we are wrapping the whole thing up. What would be one advice that you were gonna give to somebody who is in the middle of the career and they want to change path or maybe go to the next step?
You mean next step of becoming even a better bartender?
Of becoming an even better bartender, of becoming a bar owner, of becoming something.
I think for as a bartender, I think it's so important never to think that you know everything, because we do meet bartenders who think they know everything, and if you ever think you do know everything, you're lost. There's so many new trends. There's so many new products. There's so many new things going on. And the day you think you know everybody, might as well find another job. And I also think if you want to become more clever, I think it's sensible to change jobs, go from bar to bar, even, think of going abroad. If I had been much younger, I would. I actually did try to get a job abroad a couple of times, but they weren't wild about women. London, New York, places like that. There are some bars that I think technically, also hospitality-wise, are such, are admirable. It's admirable to see how they work, and the eye contact, the body language, everything is in order. Everything's working for them. I'm not perfect that way. I'm not. Probably too Danish to become that perfect. but actually, I forgot to mention that too. If you really, really want to become a good bartender, I know I mentioned about the news. I've also said, I also think you should. It's very important that you are culturally observant. Now, I'm not a fashion interested person as such, but I always look. Okay, what is the fashion industry saying? I love, but I've been brought up that way. I love to go to museums. I like to see modern exhibitions, old exhibitions, just exhibitions. I think it's really important and music, what's going on in the music business. I think it's so, it will enrich you as a bartender, and it will enrich your customers and your workplace. The smarter and more knowledgeable you are, everything will be enriched around you. And I also think privately, in your personal life too. So for me, I really want I hope bartenders do that too. Not to become trendy or nothing, but it's often that fashion or contemporary exhibitions, literature and music, it will tell you, not tell you, but it will give you a sense of what's going on in society, what's going on in the world, what are the tendencies.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Basically, taking from the other industries and bringing it into here and being acknowledge of what happens in there. It's something that most of us, not even the bartenders, like everybody should do in order to have a great time with his peers. So thank you, Kirsten, and thank you so much. And I hope our listeners will gonna take something out of this conversation. And again, thank you for being a guest to Barvox podcast.
Absolutely, anytime.
Thanks.